Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2018 Research Day for the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. I think we have a terrific program. This morning, you're going to hear the presentations from our keynote speaker, Mary Woolley, and from some of the award winners. And then this afternoon, there'll be the poster session, which is over in the Marvin Center. And everybody's looking forward to having you talk about your research. It's an opportunity for us to interact as a community. And this is, I think, probably the most exciting day of the year for those of us who are thinking about research. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Dean of the School of Medicine and the Vice President for Health Affairs, Dr. Jeffrey Ackman.
Well, good morning and welcome to the 23rd Annual Health and Medicine Research Day. Let me just first of all congratulate all of you who have submitted posters, abstracts, presentations today. Let me congratulate all of you. Let me thank you for the work that you're doing to try and advance knowledge. As you know, research, discovery, innovation, knowledge advancement is a core part of the mission of every medical school, academic medical center. And so today is our day to celebrate this part of our mission as we hear from many of our learners and faculty about your own interests in growing research and in potentially building your own research careers. So, or at least how one would potentially incorporate research or discovery or inquiry into your careers for those of you who are medical students as physicians. So this morning you'll hear from keynote speaker Mary Woolley. And Mary is the president of Research America, which is the nation's largest not-for-profit membership-supported grassroots public education and advocacy organization that's committed to making medical and health research a high national priority. And one of our missions at GW in the School of Medicine and Health Science is activism and advocacy. And typically we think about advocacy around healthcare and around our communities. But Mary's advocacy really is critically important in mobilizing all aspects of our communities around the country to support research of all sorts, of all types. And she's been incredibly effective at doing that. So it's a real treat to have her here today. After the break, our students, our co-presidents of the William Beaumont Medical Research Society, Sarah McCormick and Janine Amirault, will present this year's top medical student abstracts. And when you get over to Marvin Center, you'll see the new issue of Fusion, which we're also very excited about, our student journal on research. And then this afternoon's poster session will feature over 360 topics from students, postdocs, faculty from Milken Institute School of Public Health, the School of Nursing, the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, and Children's National. So it's a great day. It's always a lot of fun for me to interact with all of you at your posters, or as many as I can interact with. And it's now, I want to welcome back Dr. Robert Miller, who's our Senior Associate Dean for Research at the school and Professor of Anatomy and Cell Biology. Dr. Miller.
Thank you very much. So it's a real delight for me to be able to introduce Mary Woolley as our keynote speaker this morning. So Mary is the president of Research America, and I think everybody in the room knows Research America. It's the largest non-for-profit membership organization, advocacy group. And under her leadership, Research America has really moved the needle significantly. She's gained the attention of our elected members and the sort of leaders of the community for her advocacy and research. So Mary is a very distinguished individual. She's a member of the National Academy of Medicine. She served on their governing council. She serves on the board for the life sciences and is currently serving on the board for the higher education and workforce. She's a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and a founder member of the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research. Mary's won many awards. I'm not going to articulate those or embarrass her by telling you all of them. But I will say that in addition to advocacy, Mary has worked very, very hard to move the needle for our understanding of the research activity in the public press as well as in the scientific literature. And she's published a number of op-eds in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Science, Nature, the New England Journal of Medicine. She goes to many meetings. She runs a variety of presentations for the public. We were just discussing in the back opportunities within the DC area. One of the things that I will tell you is that Mary's been recognized by PBS as an unsung heroine for research advocacy. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mary Woolley.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Dean Miller, Dean Ackman. You all are what makes me excited about being an advocate for research. It's your future that advocacy is all about. The hope, the promise, the aspirations of research that are shared by everybody worldwide, wanting you to succeed. So I am just delighted, and happy 23rd anniversary for this activity, and happy future. I am going to talk to you about some things that we're doing at Research America, but more importantly, some ideas for what you can do as an advocate, because it is about you. Now, my talk today is sponsored in part by the Kavli Foundation, and I wanted to make sure that you know about this spectacular foundation that not only makes grants and awards to scientists across the sciences, I might add, but also is focusing more and more on public understanding and support of the science enterprise. And that's, of course, where we come in. Now, we have a wonderful history of working with GW, including on communications and on public engagement, how to do it, how to be effective when you're talking to your next door neighbor, a relative, or your member of Congress. This is, of course, the right city to be thinking about talking to members of Congress and being an advocate, but actually every city is all across the nation. And I know that many of you are from other parts of the country. So I don't want this talk to just seem like it's about Washington, D.C., even if a lot of it is about influencing the people who work here. Winning hearts and minds for research is another way to describe the word advocacy. And advocacy is about making the case, enthusiastically, I might add, for something that we're passionate about and proud of being part of. And like anything else, when you're trying to convince people to be on your side of a movement, something giant or something smaller, it's about building relationships. And I do think that it's a job for everybody, a little bit of everybody's time. It's not something to outsource. That said, Research America was founded to be a catalyst for advocacy. And that was almost 30 years ago now. And we've been working in that time to put research on the public's agenda in a dramatically higher spot. And in some ways, the upcoming March for Science this Saturday, I hope that you'll take a minute to join in on that, to put your face, your self, your presence there and be counted in standing up for science. And that's the kind of thing that provides the optics as well as the substance being the work that you're doing, to making research for health and science broadly a higher priority. Advocacy does work. We like to point out that it's worthwhile. We've got a track record. I don't mean just Research America, but the community of advocates. And you can see some of those things historically here, including some very exciting announcements that came from the Congress and the administration at the end of last month in adding significant new dollars, $3 billion, to the NIH budget. Really the result of hard work and a lot of advocacy. Some of the arguments that pushed that success forward and finally to the finish line included the resonance of the message that the United States is falling behind other nations in terms of spending money on research and development in order to assure a healthier, more prosperous, more beneficial world for us all. Especially so in terms of falling behind China. That argument really is resonating. It's not an anti-China argument, it's a pro-United States, not wanting to be number two at anything for that matter, but certainly not in R&D, which has powered our economy and changed all of our lives for decades and decades. And that argument is sticking in the Congress. It's also not a secret to the American public. We know from public opinion polls that we commission several times a year, every year, that there is increasing awareness that the United States might not be country number one, might not be the leader, much less a leader, in science and technology in the very near future. So this isn't just something that the insiders somehow know about and are predicting. It's quite widespread among the public, and there's a lot of concern about it. The flip side of this, and this has been unchanged for a long time in our tracking of public opinion, a lot of people, most people, when you add very important and somewhat important, which is the right way to read public opinion surveys, people in this country want our nation to be a global leader. No question about it. And that's a good thing. So back to advocacy working. This is one of the things we do is commission advertising campaigns. This one happened to be inside the Beltway, so maybe you saw it in either last fall or early in the winter, along with a lot of other groups in the science community. The point here was to raise the budget caps and sort of an inside baseball step that's necessary before there can be any new money in the science agencies. It was necessary to raise the cap that had been placed on appropriations. And this worked. The campaign helped. It's not the whole reason, of course. But it is important to use every tool at our disposal. Most important tool is people, individuals speaking out to their representatives. But just to touch on where things stand right now, we had that fabulous increase, not just to the NIH, but to all of the science agencies with the omnibus appropriations bill at the end of last month. But right now, there's a lot of conversation going on about first maybe cutting back on that very bill, it's not on this slide, that very bill that was passed with a so-called rescission. That might happen. We're fighting against that, and you should too. But it is on here, rescission. But at the same time, working on the next fiscal year's appropriation cycle. And you can read some of these other things that we have our eye on, and you should too, and we're working on. So here's the trend lines now, the actual numbers from how the NIH has been funded back to 1995. And then you see the president's budget proposal for fiscal 19. The president had an even more draconian budget cut for NIH proposed for fiscal 18. That did not prevail at all. But at the moment, appropriators are working on fiscal 19, as I mentioned. I think the most important line here is the flat line once you control for inflation or CPI in NIH funding. What that indicates is the inability to take advantage of scientific opportunity at the same time that we know we have significant health challenges to combat. But that flatlining for more than a decade has really been punishing. The good news is an uptick has started again, and we have to keep that coming, have to keep that momentum going. CDC is another terrible flatlining and cut kind of story with terrible proposed cuts. At a time when we're facing an opioid epidemic, we're facing all kinds of challenges in infectious diseases that could easily get out of control and more. So there's plenty of reasons to act, plenty of reasons to change the image of things to come. This is our former chair, John Porter, who was in the Congress and the person in the House who drove the doubling of the NIH budget in 5 years, 20 years ago. After leaving the Congress, he became the chair of our board and still serves on our board. And says over and over and over again to the science community as individuals, get involved, pays off. And we know from public opinion surveys that it's important to the public that scientists engage policymakers, yes, and engage the public, the people who elect those policymakers and who are, after all, paying for research. They're your boss. We also know that the public, this is so refreshing and positive, the public believes that public policies should be based on science. Are they, you could ask yourself? Well, not so much, not as much as we'd like. And it's nice to see this split, this bipartisan split, with a lower level of support from independents who in general tend to be more anti-government in their ideology. So that kind of explains the dip there. But it's still a strong majority. Now, it's not just about medical and health policies that the public believes that science should have a major role. And especially if you combine strongly agree and somewhat agree, which you should in reading public opinion survey data, you can see that the public expects science to be playing a role across the board in every kind of policy you can name. And yet very few members of Congress have science advisors. Very few members of Congress have a science background themselves. So you would think they would want to have a science advisor. But it's also true that very few scientists have stepped up offering to be an advisor, even a volunteer occasional advisor. It's not a bad idea. We need more of that. Now, the public also say, and they say in a way that we don't typically see from year to year, a 14% increase in about an 18-month period. Important that elected officials listen to advice from scientists. So in case you think, well, gee, an elected official doesn't really want to hear from a scientist, you should also keep in mind that the elected officials know that the public has the expectation that they hear from the scientists. Partly they know that because we show them this, and we can do it from state to reinforce it, but also because they do their own survey work. They know how well respected science is among the population. Our current chair, former governor, former Congressman Mike Castle, who was a champion when he was in the Congress, not that long ago, for embryonic stem cell research in particular, just is quoted here in this piece about the importance that it made to him and to taking a position, to understanding and then taking a position and then becoming a leader in the Congress for stem cell research. It was talking to scientists. Now, the champions, the true champions in the Congress for medical and health research are typically those whose names end up on buildings at NIH. And I think there's some really wonderful things to point out here. One is that the buildings that have names are more or less equally split between Democrats and Republicans. And that's because NIH has long been a bipartisan priority. Maybe not as high a priority as we would like in a lot of years, maybe decade plus, but a bipartisan priority. And that is crucially important to continue, to not get into a partisan kind of situation where only people in one party would support medical and health research. That would be catastrophic for your futures as well as for the nation. I also like to point out that there's a lot of buildings at NIH that still don't have names, and some space on the campus for new buildings. And I have a recommendation for the next two buildings, these gentlemen. These gentlemen are in the right place at the right time for your future and for better health in this nation, for really putting research to work. They have it in their circulatory system, in their lungs, in their every breath. They are champions for medical research. They are champions for NIH. They talk about it all the time. It is so fortunate that they are both in key positions as the head of the relevant Appropriations Committee right now. They are, more than anybody else, the reason that we've seen these wonderful increases in NIH funding. They're not the only reason. Don't misunderstand me. They have their Democrat equivalent, if you will, who are working just as hard. But these two are special. They're special the way John Porter is special. But now I want to turn to you just for a second here and ask you to think about to put yourself, shall I say, where you vote, in the community where you vote. It's not necessarily here in Washington, D.C., I know that. So wherever it is that you vote, and imagine yourself there on a weekend. Let's say it's Saturday morning and you're at Starbucks. So raise your hand if you would recognize your member of Congress, if you saw that person in there on the same errand, getting a cup of coffee. Raise your hand. I got light in my eye. Oh, so this is really, I want to compliment you because it's probably about a third or a little more of the audience. That is much higher than most places I visit. I mean, that's great. I've got another question for you. Raise your hand now if your member of Congress would recognize you by sight. Let's see. Oh, did I see a hand? There's one, 2, 3. That's about par, that's about average. That's the problem. That is a big reason why we aren't moving the needle far enough to really take advantage of opportunity in science in this country, because people in the Congress who are serving the public's interests or elected by the voters can't even picture somebody in their constituency who's a scientist. Trust me, they can picture bankers, they can picture lawyers, they can picture educators, they can picture, and albeit scientists can also be educators, I know that. They can picture real estate agents, small business people of all kinds. You get the idea. They can't picture scientists. It's a problem. So just to refresh yourselves, if you do vote in the district, and we have a special situation, as you know, with our representative who can vote in committee, but not beyond that, and maybe some of you live in right across the river in Virginia. But in any case, if you don't know who your elected representative is, it's very easy to find out. You can ask Siri or Alexa. You don't have to call us, you know. People do, though. We'll help. And of course, your senators as well. But think for a minute about this question. What do you have in common with your elected officials? You may disagree with them on many issues. That's perfectly normal. But you have something important in common with them. And that is serving the public's interests. That's how they identify themselves. And I would suggest to you that's how you should identify yourself. You serve the public's interest. Incidentally, that's also how journalists identify themselves. Another thing, another group of people very important to changing policy in this country, changing attitudes, journalists who also serve the public's interest. And you can start, if you see your member of Congress, recognize that person by sight, even if you've never met them. If you see them in Starbucks or in a grocery store or in an airport, it's perfectly fine to approach them and thank them for serving the public's interest and say, that's what I do too. Believe me, they want to talk to you, especially if you're their constituents. They want your vote. They want to know what you are doing to serve the public's interest. You can also be ready with an ask, because you're not sure how that conversation is going to go. You can ask them to be a champion. You can ask them to join the NIH caucus, or there's also a biomedical research caucus. Doesn't require them to commit to certain votes, but it's a way that they can put right on their website, and their staff can be aware that this is a priority for them. It's easy, and you can offer yourself as a resource. If you're on Twitter right this moment, there's some things that you can and should be doing today, including trying to helping us assure that there aren't going to be any rescissions, any cuts to that omnibus legislation that already passed, but there is a legal way to cut money that's already been appropriated, and it could happen. We don't know yet. But we can push if a lot of people, this is key, a lot of people speak out to their members of Congress, it'll have a much less of a chance of happening. Plus, we want to make sure that fiscal 19 looks good as well. And I want to pause at this point to say that we at Research America are not just about money for research. That's important, and we're not afraid to talk about it. We're also very concerned with the policy environment for both the public and the private sector. We work on it all the time. So there's lots of opportunities if you follow what we're doing, look at our website from time to time, look at our Twitter feed. You can see other opportunities to take 10 seconds to be an advocate. Take a minute, to be an advocate. Now, I've already referenced in many ways the importance of public sentiment, but I think the person who expressed it most effectively was President Lincoln, talking about public sentiment as everything. If you don't have the public on your side, no matter who you are, whether you're the president, a chairman of a key committee in Congress or anybody else, what you want to do isn't going to happen. We need to have the public on our side, and that's the reason that we commission public opinion surveys, is to keep a finger on the pulse of public attitudes. We commission the same kinds of surveys that members of Congress or candidates for Congress or for governor or president commission, same kind of top of mind, in the moment survey work. Oftentimes by the same kinds of, conducted by the same companies. We, of course, are extremely careful to be nonpartisan, bipartisan in our work. So what have we found out? And I'm going to just go through some of these very quickly. There's lots more information like this on our website, including some interesting trend data, starting with the agreement of the majority since, by the way, 1982, even before Research America was founded. This question verbatim was asked in public opinion surveys commissioned by the National Science Board. There has been no change in the percents within the margin of error here. No change since 1982. So if you're carrying, you or people you know are carrying around some mistaken belief that the American public doesn't support basic research anymore or something like that, you don't have any data to bring to your case. You may have anecdote, of course. Of great concern, especially when you see the trend data here, people think that the United States is losing its grip on leadership in healthcare. This is like that science leadership piece of data I showed you earlier. And they're right about this, of course. Again, the public gets this. And it's one of the reasons the public is so concerned, and there's many things to be concerned about in healthcare, but world leadership is a politically potent way of talking about it. Now, I particularly like some of the trends we've seen in this, because I think it's just so empowering ultimately for success in health and success by health researchers. We've seen that over time, more and more people say they are willing to share their personal health information for a variety of reasons that you can read here. I'm not showing you the trends, but trust me, they are going up in a wonderful way that really should empower you all to know that the public wants you to succeed and wants to be part of that success by contributing their own data and for that matter, their time in clinical research. I'm not going to go into all of that, but we have that data as well. This data won't surprise you. Many others have seen the same thing. In fact, the percentages are going up at the top there. Doesn't mean people don't care about the other things listed here. This is a forced choice, only name one. But it shows you the political potency of the high topics there. Now, if we're going to improve healthcare delivery and healthcare ultimately, we need to do more to invest in understanding what we're doing inappropriately, what's going wrong so we can fix it, otherwise known as health services research. But I don't think that term is a usefully descriptive one. We're more likely to say healthcare delivery research to make it more clear what we're talking about. Let's get at the things that are going wrong, understand them, and fix them. This is concerning. That only a third of the public believes that their health care is based on the best and most recent research available. They're probably right, actually. We know from other sources. This is extremely concerning. And on the advocacy, in terms of advocacy, it's concerning for a number of reasons. First of all, people aren't getting the most clearly evidence-based healthcare. That's a huge concern, number one. Secondly, they're not sure research is making any difference because they're not getting the benefit of it. So that then, it's a vicious cycle. That then undercuts support for research. There's a strong majority now concerned about the decline in life expectancy. And that's been a talking point that's been, I think, effective in terms of advocacy. It's unfortunate that it's true, to put it mildly. A lot of that has been pointed at not only, and is factually a result of problems that are categorized broadly as social determinants of health, that we just haven't invested enough in this country. Understanding them and fixing them. And then, of course, also the opioid epidemic. And people strongly support getting at this. This is HIV/AIDS level, epidemic and potential disaster, and we're not treating it that way, at least not yet. Now, generally speaking, the public still says robustly that the benefits of research outweigh any harms, potentially. They have confidence in scientists to act in the best interest of the public. That goes across both parties with some differences. And express confidence in scientists along with the military. This ranking of confidence and trust has, both in our work and that of others, this is Pew's work, has stayed pretty much the same for decades. Decades of scientists in the military being at the top, if you will. And you can see where elected officials are there. And elected officials know this, which is why they want to be seen with members of the military, members of the science community. The military has an advantage here because we know what they look like. We know who they are. They're handy for everyone that they have uniforms. I mean, there's a kind of uniform for scientists and physicians, but it's not the same kind of instant recognizability. But trust me, elected officials want to be seen with the people who are the most trusted in the society. But this, all said another way, is to point out that you and your colleagues are invisible in our society. So we ask a question in these surveys: can you give me the name of a living scientist? So think about what a general population response might be to that question. Here's the answer. Now we know that we lost Stephen Hawking. I actually saw him on this stage. I saw him speak on this stage a few years ago. This response level, not the names, but this level of response of 84% saying no hasn't changed for 25 years. The names have changed. Some, not all of them, actually. 25 years. It's a really unfortunate thing to have to report to you. If this, my prediction, my hypothesis would be that if it were reversed, we would be funding science of all kinds, at the level of scientific opportunity, which is the right metric. That is the right metric, the opportunity level. Okay, next question. We ask, can you give me the name of someplace, any place, where medical or health, that we've now switched from science generally to medical and health research is conducted? This is not a hard question, right? Not a hard question. Well, it turns out it is a hard question. 2/3 of the public just say, no, I can't. I don't know anywhere that medical research is conducted. This is like shockingly awful. Shockingly awful. And we could talk for a long time about why those that are named and so forth. I guess, good news, because this hasn't changed either for 25 years, I guess the good news is that NIH has gone from being mentioned 4% of the time to 6% of the time. So I guess that's progress. But even when we do this, if this question is asked in a state, rather than just national data overall, in a state, the percentages don't go up. It's just bad all over the country that 2/3 people don't know anywhere that medical or health research is conducted. So what can we do about this? What can you do about this? First of all, it's changing hearts and minds. It's engaging, and it's hearts before minds. It's an emotional connection that changes any of our opinions and our attitudes, but whatever you can name. This is based on research that we know this. And it's about storytelling, and it's about telling other people's stories. What are your reasons to want research to succeed? What's their story, not what's my story that I'm determined to make sure you hear? What's your story that I can help accomplish? Why is it so hard for basic scientists in particular to tell a story that other people can relate to? It's easy. You don't have to commit to curing cancer tomorrow with your basic research. What you should be able to say comfortably is that your work might one day help cure diseases like fill in the blank. Might one day. That's your hope and aspiration. That's something that people share with you. Beating people on the head to make sure that they really and truly value basic research like they say they do in that earlier data point, trying to make sure they're really committed to that point of view, is not a conversation that will result in winning hearts and minds. People are skeptical, and you've probably had experiences of people asking you, well, what am I supposed to think? Science can't make up its mind. One day, red wine is good for you. The next day, it's not. What is going on with stents? It goes on and on and on. When people talk as though they're skeptical, they're doubting, I think the right thing to do is to say, you sound skeptical. That's the way I was trained as a scientist, to be skeptical, to ask questions. We have that in common. We're watching science in real time, just about real time today, and it's messy. It's messy. There's a lot of questions. It's okay. It's okay. Learning about the process of science by just observing it can be helped along in a positive way if scientists align with the general public on that, rather than despairing about it. It's a good thing, skepticism. As is telling stories, rather than clobbering people with facts. And doing it in a way that just isn't transferring your long paper onto Twitter, but rather coming up with a new and stronger narrative. One, for example, that you can use a frame that we suggest, adapted to whatever is your particular point at the moment, the then, now, and imagine frame. Then, this works for everything. Then, back in the old days, people were dying of HIV/AIDS. Just one example. You can fill in the blank for what you might be working on. Now, thanks to research, thanks to the investment this nation made in all kinds of research, basic research, translational research, prevention, today people can live full, active, long lives with a chronic disease like diabetes. Imagine the day will come, if we continue to put research to work, that we can put HIV/AIDS and diabetes in the history books. You get the idea. Research is the solution to what ails us. The brand of science is hope, aspiration. Sometimes people bring up and it's happening more right now, well, how can we possibly spend more money on research? This country's going to go bankrupt. We're in debt. It's just a lot of money. And there are some good questions there, yes, but we have to be thinking about compared to what? Compared to what? First of all, is the NIH budget large? Yes, thank goodness. I'd say it's not large enough. But again, compared to what? Compared to what? There's easy examples you can use every day that are topical and of interest and come up in everyday conversation. This is just one. You can find out more on our website or learn how to do this yourself. It's very simple. And fundamentally, when we talk about big numbers, let's have a nation that's worth defending. Fighting the defense budget, which is sometimes a temptation, especially in academic audiences, academic circles, is a fool's errand. It's going to make enemies, so to speak, to fight the defense budget, not to mention the fact that it's a highly valued purpose of our government's existence and funding. Constitution on founding fathers on down through the present. It's important to have a nation with strong defense. It's equally important to have a nation worth defending, a nation with strong education, strong science, strong transportation and infrastructure. The list goes on. Just for comparison purposes again, how to talk about big numbers. Here's what we're spending per person per year, and this is the appropriations that just passed, for a variety of agencies that we track and advocate for, in contrast to defense. And you can do your own math and other things you might want to contrast with. But is $115 per American too much to ask for research on every disease and disability you can think of, from A to Z, from Alzheimer's and autism to Zika? I don't think so. And most other people don't either. So there's other ways to talk about big money that makes it personal and affordable, as it actually is. So talking to non-scientists, to members of the public, is something that the science community, aspiring scientists, aspiring physicians, nurses, healthcare professionals of all kinds, don't do enough of. Don't do enough talking to other people who don't have the benefit of our training, our commitment, our career path, but want us to succeed. People want you to succeed. Please talk to them. It's okay if they're skeptical. Put your face on what you do so that other people know about it and can be proud. And remember that the most important 4 words that you, a researcher, can say and convey are, I work for you. When you meet someone for the first time, whatever the setting may be, and they say, now what is it that you do? Instead of saying that you're a microbiologist, instead of saying that even that you're in training as a physician, say, I work for you. What do you do? I work for you. And the conversation will go very differently than it has likely gone in other situations for you, because people want to have others working for them. They want you to be working for them. For me, I want you to work for me. I want you to make my life healthier. I want you to make my family's life healthier and stronger. I want our nation to be more prosperous. I want research to drive our economy as it has in the past many decades. I want you to succeed. And I didn't realize that you were working for me. How does that, tell me more about that. Those are the conversations we all want to have. I am a very privileged person, very fortunate indeed, to be working for you as an advocate. Thank you.